You know that smell when a server room has not been dusted since the Bush administration? It smells like ozone, burnt plastic, and the accumulated desperation of 1,000 unanswered help desk tickets. That has been my perfume for 15 years. My name is Edward. I am a 54-year-old man who makes sure your email works so you can send passive-aggressive notes to the accounting department about their yogurt consumption. I am the one who crawls under your desk to plug in the Ethernet cable you kicked out while daydreaming about early retirement. I am the invisible backbone of this company. Usually, I like it that way. Invisibility is a superpower. It means nobody notices when you are watching. But 3 months ago, the invisibility started to feel less like a superpower and more like a burial shroud. I was sitting in my office, which is a converted storage closet that hums loud enough to vibrate my fillings loose. I was staring at a budget denial email. Before I get into the details of how I burned this corporate environment to the ground, let me explain the situation. The email was from Owen, our new HR director. Owen is the kind of guy who uses words like synergy and drills down without any irony, while wearing a suit that costs more than my car. The email said in very clear terms that my request for a basic firewall upgrade, a critical security patch that stood between our sensitive data and every hacker in Eastern Europe, was denied due to budgetary constraints. Budgetary constraints. That is corporate language for we spent the money on something shiny and useless. About 10 minutes after I read that email, I looked out the window. My office might be a closet, but it has a tiny view of the executive parking lot. There it was, a brand new slate gray Porsche Cayenne. It was glistening in the sun, still sporting the temporary dealer tags. Stepping out of it was the CEO wife, a woman whose primary contribution to society seemed to be posting inspirational quotes on social media. I watched her walk into the building, bypassing security because the rules do not apply to the royal family. I knew for a fact the CEO, a man named Julian Lancaster, had been crying about poverty in every town hall meeting for the last 2 quarters. He would tell us to tighten our belts while looking somber and checking his expensive watch. We all have to make sacrifices. Apparently, his sacrifice was settling for the leather interior instead of the suede. I do not smoke in the building, but I have a vape pen that looks like a USB drive. When the frustration gets too high, I take a hit right there in the server room. The fans suck the evidence away instantly. I pulled up the procurement logs. You see, that is the thing about IT. We see everything. We are the digital janitors. When you buy a laptop, I see the invoice. When you subscribe to a premium software package, I approve the license. When you try to hide a luxury vehicle purchase in the company ledger, you better hope the person reviewing the codes is completely oblivious. I am not oblivious. I scrolled through the back-end expenses for the month. It did not take long to find it. The transaction was buried under a generic vendor code, usually reserved for heavy hardware maintenance. Server rack expansion vendor, Stuttgart Logistics. The amount was exactly $118,000. I almost laughed out loud. It was so incredibly lazy. It was the kind of fraud that assumes nobody is looking, or that the person looking is too scared to say anything. They listed a Porsche as a server rack expansion. I guess in Julian Lancaster's mind, a car has 4 wheels and a computer in the dashboard, so that is basically IT infrastructure, right? My blood started to boil. This was not the quick anger of a young man, but the slow, deep rage of a 54-year-old man who has followed the rules his entire life only to get stepped on. I looked at my screen at the denied firewall request. We were running on security protocols from 2018. If a teenager decided to attack our network, we would collapse instantly. But the CEO wife needed heated seats. I reached into my desk drawer. Underneath a pile of tangled cables and empty ibuprofen bottles, I kept a notebook. It was not a digital file. Digital files can be wiped. IT guys can be locked out of servers. But a physical spiral-bound notebook is forever. I opened it to the first blank page. I had been keeping this log for years, mostly tracking minor discrepancies. The business lunches that were clearly dates. The office supplies that were actually video game consoles. But this Porsche was the big one. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote the invoice number. Then I wrote asset tag 00459 Porsche Cayenne. Allocation server maintenance. User Mrs. Lancaster. Does not appear to improve network latency. I closed the book. The red cover was tattered and stained with coffee rings. It looked like garbage, but it was the most dangerous object in the building. I did not know it yet, but the fuse had been lit. I was just waiting for them to hand me the match, and they absolutely handed it to me. They poured gasoline all over the situation and invited me to watch it burn. The rest of the week was a blur of small insults. Owen started hovering around my department looking for inefficiencies. He asked why I needed 3 monitors. He asked why my team overtime was so high. It is because the system is held together by prayers. While Owen optimizes synergy, I am manually rebooting the servers at 3 a.m. so he can get his morning newsletter. I just smiled at him and said, I am very committed to the infrastructure of this company. Owen smiled back, checking his reflection in the server rack. He said the upcoming all-hands meeting is going to be a pivot point. We are trimming the fat. I thought I was the muscle, but I was wrong. We think doing our jobs well keeps us safe, but to a leech, blood is just a resource. I spent the weekend preparing for war. I backed up my personal files to an encrypted cloud drive. I cross-referenced every entry in my red notebook with printed copies of the invoices, which I stored in a fireproof box in the trunk of my car. Paranoia is useful when they are actually out to get you. I was ready for whatever Monday morning would bring. Monday morning arrived with a heavy atmosphere. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main atrium. The air conditioning was broken again. I could not fulfill the repair ticket because we supposedly could not afford the parts. The room was extremely hot and smelled of cheap cologne, nervous sweat, and the pizza they ordered to boost morale. Nothing says we appreciate your hard work like lukewarm pizza. While the executives discussed potential layoffs, I stood in the back near the exit. I always prefer to know my escape route. Julian Lancaster was up on the stage wearing a suit that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. He talked about market challenges and difficult headwinds. He looked tanned and rested, like a man who spent his weekend driving a fast car that was technically a server rack. Then Owen took the microphone and the entire mood shifted. It went from boring corporate talk to something much colder and sharper. Owen scanned the room, his eyes landing on me. In that split second, I knew exactly what was happening. I was about to be made an example of in front of everyone. We have to address some cultural issues, Owen said. His voice was amplified by the speakers I had set up just an hour ago. He talked about insubordination, resistance to change, and legacy employees who think they own the place. He did not say my name yet, but he did not need to. The crowd parted slightly, people shifting away from me like I was carrying a disease. I clutched my bag. The red notebook was inside, feeling heavy against my side. I took a deep breath of the stale air. Let us talk about the IT department, Owen said with a smile. There it was. I was not going to be laid off quietly. I was going to be executed publicly. The atrium was silent except for the hum of the vending machines. Specifically, the refusal to adapt to modern budgeting strategies, Owen continued. My heart hammered against my ribs. I saw my team, young guys I had trained from scratch, looking down at their shoes. They were terrified. If the 54-year-old manager gets fired, the juniors are next. Julian stood behind Owen, looking stern and disappointed. Edward, Owen said. He said my name with a smile, which was the worst part. We have discussed the firewall upgrades. We have discussed the budget. Yet I am hearing reports that you have been complaining about leadership to your staff, creating a toxic environment in our family-first culture. I had not complained. I had simply stated facts. The servers were overheating, the licenses were expired, and we were drowning in technical debt. But stating a negative fact is an act of treason in the corporate world. It is insubordination. Owen raised his voice for dramatic effect. And frankly, it is incompetence. If you cannot manage a budget, you cannot manage this department. Effective immediately, we are terminating your employment. The room let out a collective gasp. You do not fire a 15-year veteran during an all-hands meeting. You do it quietly on a Friday afternoon with a cardboard box and a security guard. This was a show trial designed to scare everyone else into submission. They wanted me to get angry, to shout, and to prove I was the difficult employee they claimed I was. My hands were shaking, so I put them in my pocket so nobody would see. I looked at Owen, who looked completely triumphant. You can leave your badge at the front desk, Owen said, waving his hand dismissively. Security will escort you out. Time seemed to slow down completely. In high-stress situations, the brain dumps adrenaline, and everything turns into a slow-motion movie. I saw the sweat on Julian's upper lip. I saw a man in a gray suit standing near the water cooler. He was not an employee. He was holding a clipboard and looking extremely bored. I recognized his type instantly. The rimless glasses, the neat haircut, and the absolute focus on numbers. He was an external forensic accountant. They must have brought him in to justify their restructuring and rubber-stamp their lies. A calm wave washed over me. If my career here was dead anyway, I might as well haunt the place. Incompetence? I said loudly. My voice carried across the silent room. Owen blinked in surprise. You said I am being fired for incompetence regarding the budget? I asked, stepping away from the wall. I started walking toward the front of the room, but I did not walk toward the stage. I walked straight toward the accountant. Edward, this is not a debate. Owen snapped, his smile completely disappearing. Two security guards stepped forward hesitantly. I shot them a look that stopped them in their tracks. I kept walking, my shoes clicking on the floor. I reached into my bag. I am sure Owen panicked for a second, but I pulled out the red notebook. It looked pathetic with its bent spiral binding and peeling cover, but it was the diary of a man driven mad by corporate greed. I stopped right in front of the accountant. He looked up, startled. You are the forensic auditor, right? I asked. He nodded slowly and said his name was Donovan. Mr. Donovan, I said loudly, I am being fired for managing the budget incorrectly. I think you should see the real budget. Edward. Julian Lancaster shouted from the stage. That is company property. You are unauthorized to share it. I ignored him completely and handed the notebook to Donovan. It is a personal log, I explained, my handwriting and my observations, but the invoice numbers are absolutely real. You can look them up in the database, assuming they have not deleted them yet. Donovan took the book reluctantly, but he opened it. Edward, step away right now, Owen yelled, running down the stairs. This is harassment. Page 42, I told Donovan. Start right there. Donovan flipped through the pages. The entire room was paralyzed, dozens of people holding their breath. He found page 42, adjusted his glasses, and read the entry. He paused, squinted, and then did something truly beautiful. He stopped looking at the book and looked up at Julian Lancaster. He did not look bored anymore. He looked incredibly confused. Mr. Lancaster, Donovan said, his voice dry and authoritative. Julian froze in place. This is a disgruntled employee. Donovan, do not waste your time, Julian said nervously. Mr. Lancaster, Donovan repeated, ignoring the CEO. Why is there an entry here, cross-referenced with a hardware invoice, that lists a Porsche Cayenne under server maintenance? The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. I looked at Owen, whose face had turned pale. Julian looked like he was trying to calculate how fast he could run to his car. Julian started, but the words completely failed him. And Donovan continued, turning the page. Why does the off-site data storage facility address match a condominium in Aspen? I smiled. It was the smile of someone who just dropped a bomb and was walking away. I will leave you to your audit, I said to Donovan. I have to go pack my box. I turned around and walked out of the room. I did not look back. I could feel the chaos erupting behind me as the shockwave hit the room. I walked out of the atrium without looking back. The murmur behind me quickly turned into an absolute roar of confusion and panic. I walked past the stunned receptionist and the security guards who were staring at the ceiling, pretending they did not see anything. I made my way to my office, my converted closet. I knew I had about 10 minutes before they completely cut my network access. I sat down at my desk, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I did not steal any company data because that would be a violation of the law, specifically regarding unauthorized access and data theft. I just ensured my personal backups were secure. Then I sent one final command to the server. I activated a dead man switch on the logging system. If anyone tried to delete the transaction history for the past 3 years, the system would block the deletion, archive the files to a read-only partition, and email a copy to the board of directors. It was my insurance policy. Suddenly, my screen flickered and showed an access denied message. They were faster than I expected, or maybe someone literally pulled the network cable from the wall. It did not matter anymore. The seed was planted. The red notebook was in Donovan's hands, and Donovan seemed like the kind of auditor who cared deeply about where the money went. I grabbed a framed photo, my emergency snacks, and my coat. I walked out of the building and into the bright sunlight. I felt strangely calm. I was officially unemployed and likely facing legal threats, but for the first time in 15 years, I felt powerful. I got into my old car and sat there with the engine idling. I watched the front doors of the building. Usually, an all-hands meeting lasts a full hour. This one ended exactly 12 minutes after I walked out. The doors burst open and people flooded out into the parking lot. It looked like an emergency evacuation. People were holding their phones, texting frantically. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from Toby, one of my junior sysadmins. Toby is a brilliant 22-year-old who wears graphic tees to client meetings and manages databases like a genius. He texted, "Oh my God, Edward. Julian is screaming at the accountant. Owen is literally crying. They kicked everyone out of the room. What was in that notebook?" I smiled and typed my reply, "Just the technical specifications, Toby." I put the car in gear and drove out of the lot, cruising past the slate-gray Porsche on my way out. I drove to a quiet local bar. It was still morning, but the place was open. I ordered a drink from Hank, the bartender. Hank looked like a guy who had seen it all. "Rough day?" Hank asked while wiping the counter. "Best day of my life, Hank," I replied. "I just got fired." We clinked glasses. While I sat there, I thought about the red notebook. It was not just a list of bad expenses. It was a timeline of absolute arrogance. Corporate fraud always starts small. It begins with a team dinner featuring expensive wine. Then it becomes a conference trip where they spend 3 days gambling instead of working. When nobody stops them, they get brave and incredibly stupid. The Porsche was just the most obvious violation. My favorite entry was the cloud storage redundancy project. They billed the company $45,000 for off-site storage, but the address belonged to Owen's mother in Florida. Unless his mom was running a data center in her garage, that money was stolen. I knew Donovan would find that entry on page 56. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Brenda, the executive assistant. She wrote, "Security just locked down the entire executive wing. They are shredding documents everywhere." I took a sip of my drink. Amateurs. You can shred physical paper, but you cannot shred a digital footprint unless you know exactly where to look. I realized I had crossed a major line. I was now a whistleblower, and whistleblowers face massive legal battles. I opened my personal laptop and connected to the bar network. I needed to secure my personal accounts. I moved my savings to a different bank and changed all my passwords. Then a notification popped up on my screen. Someone was trying to log into my personal cloud storage account. The IP address originated from the Office Executive Network. They were actively trying to hack me, guessing basic passwords. It was pathetic and desperate. I typed a quick command to execute a honeypot script. I had a folder labeled confidential evidence. If someone clicked it, it locked their screen and played loud circus music for 5 minutes. I watched the logs confirm the script executed perfectly. Somewhere in that executive suite, Owen was staring at a frozen computer while music blasted loudly. Hank noticed me laughing, just imagining a clown getting a pie in the face, I explained. A few minutes later, I received an email on my secure account. The subject read, "We need to talk." The sender was Donovan. The message said, "Edward, this is Donovan. We need to meet outside the office immediately. There are discrepancies that go way beyond the Porsche. I need context regarding page 88 and the consulting fees. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in 1 hour. Come alone." I stared at the screen. Page 88. The user experience consultants. 3 individuals who billed the company massively but had zero professional presence and were paid via offshore wire transfers. Donovan had found the phantom payroll. I packed up my laptop and started my car. "Hang on, Donovan," I said to myself. "I am bringing the receipts." The diner on 4th Street was the perfect meeting spot. It had sticky tables and coffee that tasted like battery acid. The corporate executives would never be caught dead in a place like this. I spotted Donovan in a back corner booth. He looked completely out of place in his crisp suit, sitting rigidly with the red notebook open in front of him. He had not touched his coffee or toast. I slid into the booth across from him. He jumped slightly and covered the notebook with his hand. "Relax, Donovan," I said. "It is just felony embezzlement." He adjusted his glasses and looked around nervously. "Edward," he whispered, "do you have any idea what you have handed me? A one-way ticket to unemployment?" I asked casually. Or a Porsche. The Porsche is the least of it, Donovan replied, tapping the notebook. Look at page 88. These user experience consultants billed $5,000 a week each for 2 straight years. I poured some sugar into my terrible coffee. I looked up their IP addresses once. Curiously, they all logged in from the exact same luxury apartment complex in Miami. They never submitted a single line of code, no reports, and no tickets. Not a single deliverable. Donovan looked extremely pale. I checked the vendor registry, he said. The tax ID numbers belong to shell companies. Edward, this looks like massive money laundering or paying for services that are definitely not IT related. They are high-end escorts, Donovan, I stated flatly. Julian thinks he is a genius, but he is just a walking cliché with a corporate credit card. Donovan rubbed his temples in distress. If this gets out, the company stock will tank completely. The board of directors will be liable for severe lack of oversight. The authorities will get involved. Goods, I said. Burn it down. I cannot just burn it down, he hissed at me. I have a fiduciary responsibility. I need absolute proof. The notebook is a fantastic lead, but it is not concrete proof. I need the digital trail. The emails approving these fake invoices and the wire transfer authorizations. I reminded him that they had locked me out of the system and were currently shredding physical documents. Donovan gave me a long, calculating look. You were the IT manager for 15 years. You built the entire network. Are you honestly telling me you do not have a back door? I took a slow sip of my coffee and evaluated him. Donovan was a corporate auditor. He cared about numbers making sense. Julian was creating financial chaos, and I was the key to restoring order. Hypothetically, I said, leaning closer, if there were a shadow backup, a complete mirror of the procurement server that updates in real time, where would one look for it? Donovan's eyes widened. I explained that one might look for a hidden admin account with a very specific password structure. Donovan pulled out a notepad and started writing furiously. I grabbed his wrist to stop him. If you use that account, you burn all of them, I warned him. Julian, Owen, the CFO, everyone who signed off on the fraud, there is no going back. If they find out I gave you access, they will come after me with an army of lawyers. They are already coming after you, Edward, Donovan said, pulling his hand away. I got a call from the legal department on my way here. They are drafting a cease and desist order. They are preparing a civil lawsuit against you for theft of proprietary data, meaning this notebook. Let them try, I replied, trying to hide the anxiety in my stomach. I need to verify the wire transfers, Donovan said as he stood up. He left some cash on the table. If this ghost account works, this is a historical level of corporate stupidity. Stay safe, Edward. These guys are desperate and they have money to hire scary people. He hurried out of the diner, holding the red notebook tightly. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it cautiously. Hello, Edward. The voice was smooth and professional. This is Oliver Pierce, representing Julian Lancaster and the company. I am calling to discuss the immediate return of company property currently in your possession. I do not have any company property, I said. I left my laptop on my desk. We are talking about the logbook, Edward, Oliver said, dropping his friendly tone. We are also talking about the confidentiality agreement you signed. If that book is shared with unauthorized third parties, we will seek massive damages. We will take your house and your pension. I asked if that was a threat. Oliver called it a reality check. He told me to bring the book to the office by 5 p.m. In exchange, they were offering a severance package of 6 months' pay and a neutral reference. Hush money. For a brief second, I thought about taking the deal to avoid the stress. But if I took it, they would win. They would keep the Porsche and the escorts, and eventually they would find a reason to ruin me anyway. Oliver, you can take your severance package and throw it away, I told him. I do not have the book anymore. I gave it to a friend named Donovan. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I drove home to monitor the situation from my personal setup. I poured myself a cheap drink and booted up my secure computer. I connected using the hidden admin account. The network dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Usually, network logs move slowly. Today they were scrolling at light speed. Owen and the CFO were frantically trying to delete files related to performance reviews and wire transfers. The system automatically blocked every deletion attempt, thanks to the legal hold I had initiated earlier. I laughed out loud, watching Owen fail 6 times in a row to delete the exact same folder. Then I received a message from Toby. He warned me that management was confiscating laptops to scrub the hard drives manually. I told Toby to hand his over, but to pull the hard drive out first and claim it crashed. I was watching an empire collapse from the comfort of my living room. Then, my remote connection was suddenly terminated. Donovan had locked me out to secure the digital crime scene and protect me from being blamed for the intrusion. It was a smart move. Just as I leaned back in my chair, my doorbell rang loudly. I checked the peephole and saw Brenda, the executive assistant. She looked absolutely terrified, holding a large manila envelope. I opened the door and let her inside. Brenda stepped into my apartment looking exhausted. She sat on my couch, clutching the manila envelope tightly. She told me Julian was locked in his office with his personal lawyer, shredding documents that kept jamming the machine. "Julian is panicking, Edward," Brenda said. "He is calling fixers." I asked her why she was here. She explained that she kept her own secret files over the years. My red notebook proved financial fraud, but Brenda envelope contained the personal dirt. She had copies of apartment leases for mistresses paid with company funds, jewelry receipts, and other highly incriminating evidence. We spent an hour going through the documents. It was shocking. Owen had expensed a purebred dog under the guise of a security unit. Julian had expensed luxury vacations as business development trips. Suddenly, my laptop chimed with a new email. It was from the board of directors, sent via Oliver Pierce, the lawyer. The subject line read, "Proposal for Consulting Agreement." The board recognized my unique knowledge of the IT infrastructure and wanted to hire me as an external consultant to assist in the audit. They offered a rate of $250 per hour and a $20,000 upfront retainer. The only condition was that I had to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding everything I had found. "They want to buy your silence," Brenda pointed out. "They want you to help them bury the evidence." I stared at the screen. It was a lot of money, but taking it meant completely losing my dignity. I hit reply and copied Donovan on the email. I wrote, "Dear Board, my consulting rate is now $500 per hour and my retainer is $50,000. Regarding the NDA, absolutely not. I will assist Mr. Donovan in uncovering the truth, not hiding it. See you tomorrow morning." I hit send. Brenda looked at me in shock, realizing I just turned down a massive payout to ensure the executives went down. The next morning, I dressed in a sharp blazer and drove to the office. The gate was down and my badge was deactivated. I pressed the intercom and spoke to Larry, the security guard. Larry told me I was banned from the premises. I reminded Larry that I knew about his habit of watching movies on the security monitors during his shifts. The gate immediately lifted. I parked and walked into the building. The atmosphere was completely chaotic. People were whispering nervously in the lobby. I walked straight to the executive floor and found Donovan in the main conference room. It looked like a war room. The whiteboards were covered in diagrams mapping out the financial crimes, and my red notebook sat in the center of the table. Donovan looked exhausted but incredibly focused. "The board is terrified," Donovan said. "They rejected your consulting fee, but they agreed to grant you full immunity if you help me decrypt the ghost logs." We got to work immediately. The CFO had already tried to flee the country on a medical leave excuse, but his flight was delayed by bad weather. I used my admin access to track his company phone directly to the airport terminal. We spent the next several hours dissecting the company financial history. The fraud was staggering. There were phantom employees on the payroll, and their salaries were routed to offshore accounts. Around noon, Owen burst into the conference room. He looked terrible, his suit wrinkled, and his hair a mess. He demanded to know why I was in the building, claiming I was a terminated employee. I ignored his yelling and pulled up a specific file. "Owen," I said calmly, "I am looking at your home office stipend from 2021. You claim $12,000 for an ergonomic workstation. The invoice is from a company that sells hot tubs." Owen froze completely. He stammered, claiming it had hydrotherapy features for his back pain. Donovan looked over his glasses. "You expensed a hot tub?" Donovan asked in disbelief. Owen panicked and tried to deflect the blame. "Everyone was doing it," Owen yelled defensively. "Julian bought an entire boat and listed it as marine logistics research." The room went dead silent. Donovan slowly picked up his pen. A boat? He repeated. Please, tell me more. Owen realized he had just confessed to a massive crime and implicated the CEO. I typed quickly on my laptop. Oh, here it is, I announced. $250,000 for a yacht. I looked at Owen and told him to go back to his office, not touch his computer, and wait for the authorities. This situation crossed into criminal territory hours ago. We were dealing with clear violations of the law, including California Penal Code Section 470 for forgery and fraud, and federal wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. The executives had also violated the Warren Act by planning sudden mass layoffs to cover their financial tracks. Owen turned and literally ran down the hallway. Donovan and I mapped out the entire conspiracy. The CEO, HR, and finance were all deeply involved. For 15 years, I had kept their network running, completely unaware of the massive corruption happening right above me. By the end of the week, Julian and Owen were officially indicted. The board fired the entire executive suite and offered me a permanent position as the director of IT security with a massive salary increase. I accepted, but only after negotiating a brand new server room with heavy-duty air conditioning. The Porsche was seized by federal agents. In the end, the invisible IT guy burned down their corrupt empire using nothing but a tattered red notebook and the absolute truth.